Arthur Miller, or Art as everyone called him, leaned back in his worn leather chair, the scent of stale coffee and ambition thick in the air of his office. The late afternoon sun slanted through the blinds, illuminating dust motes dancing in the stale air. It was 1970, and Art was directing the Spotlight Hour, a weekly variety show that was frankly floundering. Ratings were in the toilet, the network was breathing down his neck, and Art felt like he was running on fumes. He'd been in the business for decades, seen fads come and go, stars rise and fall, but this was different. This felt like a slow, painful fade out for his own career. His phone buzzed, startling him. It was Roger Sterling from a network, a man whose voice usually carried the metallic taste of deadlines and demands. "Aren't you there?" Roger's voice crackled. "Always, Roger. Just contemplating the meaning of life, or lack thereof." "In our current ratings," Roger chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "Funny, Art. Look, we need a miracle. And I think I've found one. We're talking big. We're talking showstopper. We're talking Elvis Presley." "Elvis, Roger. Are you serious? The King? Last I heard he was doing Vegas, playing to packed houses." "Sure, but his TV appearances have been, well, a bit stiff lately." "A lot of those Vegas performances were all flash, no real fire." "Exactly," Roger cut in, ignoring Art's concern. "That's why we'll control it. Complete control. He'll lip sync, every note pre-recorded. Perfect. Flawless. No mistakes, no surprises. Just the iconic image, singing his greatest hits. The nostalgia, it'll be a ratings explosion. Art, trust me." Art's stomach churned. Lip syncing. He hated it with a passion that burned hotter than any stage light. He'd built his reputation on live performances, on capturing the raw, unpredictable magic of an artist truly performing. He remembered the old days, the sweat, the improvisation, the genuine emotion that could only come from a live microphone. Forcing a legend like Elvis Presley to mime his own songs felt like a sacred thing Art believed in. "Roger, you know how I feel about lip syncing," Art said, trying to keep his voice steady. "It drains the soul out of a performance. It turns a living, breathing artist into a mannequin." "Art, this isn't about artistic integrity right now. It's about survival," Roger countered, his voice sharper. "The network is bleeding money on your show. This is our last shot." Colonel Parker, his manager. "He's on board with it. He likes the control, too. It's non-negotiable if you want Elvis. You play by our rules." A long silence stretched between them. Art stared out the window, watching the city lights begin to flicker on. He thought of his crew, his team, the dozens of people who relied on the Spotlight Hour for their livelihoods. He thought of his own career. The years he poured into this industry, was his artistic pride worth risking all of that? He closed his eyes. The image of Elvis, once a vibrant, rebellious force, now reduced to a human jukebox, haunted him. But what choice did he have? It was Elvis or nothing, and nothing meant unemployment for a lot of good people. "All right, Roger." Art finally conceded the words, tasting like ash in his mouth. "You win. Get me, Elvis. But don't expect me to like it." Roger chuckled again, this time with a hint of triumph. "That's my Art. You'll thank me when the ratings come in. I'll send over the details. He'll be here next week for rehearsals. Get ready for the King." Art hung up the phone, pushed himself out of his chair, and walked over to his wall of framed photographs. Iconic moments he'd captured: a jazz singer lost in improvisation, a comedian cracking up the audience, a rock band testament to the power of live performance. Now he was being forced to orchestrate a charade. He looked at an old photo of a young, vibrant Elvis, hips swiveling, eyes blazing with passion, a microphone clutched in his hand as if it were an extension of his very soul. He wondered what that young man would think of the deal Art had just made. He wondered if the fire was still there, hidden beneath the layers of fame and expectation. He wondered if just for a moment he could find a way to let it burn through again, but deep down he doubted it. The machine, it seemed, was too powerful. The following week, the studio lot was abuzz. Word had spread like wildfire. Elvis was coming. Even the usually jaded security guards had a little extra bounce in their step. Art watched the spectacle from the control booth, a quiet observer amidst the swirling chaos. Limousines, security details, production trucks, and an alarming number of fans who had somehow managed to get wind of the arrival date lined the streets outside. Then he saw it, a sleek black Cadillac, longer and shinier than anything else, pulled up to the stage entrance. The doors opened and out stepped a figure that was instantly recognizable even from a distance, Elvis Presley. He was taller than Art expected and broader, with a quiet intensity in his gaze. He wore dark sunglasses, but even through them Art could sense the weight of the legend he carried. He was surrounded by a small entourage, a couple of imposing bodyguards, a harried-looking assistant, and, of course, Colonel Tom Parker, a man whose presence filled a room even before he spoke. The colonel was a large man, always with a cigar, a perpetual smirk, and an aura of shrewd calculation. "Mr. Presley, Colonel Parker, welcome to the Spotlight Hour," Art said, extending a hand to each. "I'm Art Miller, the director." Colonel Parker's handshake was firm, but his eyes were already scanning the room. "Assessing Miller," he grunted. "Heard good things." "Let's make some magic, eh?" Elvis, however, had a different grip. His hand was warm, surprisingly gentle. He pulled off his sunglasses, revealing eyes that were a startling blue, intelligent and a little weary. "Mr. Miller," he said, his voice a low, melodic drawl. "Pleasure to be here." He looked around the vast, empty soundstage, a flicker of something in his eyes that Art couldn't quite place. Perhaps curiosity, perhaps a ghost of past performances. "Let's get you settled in," Art said, trying to sound welcoming, despite the knot in his stomach. "We can go over the schedule and the technical requirements." He led them towards a private green room, away from the buzzing crew. Once inside, Art cut straight to the chase. "Mr. Presley, the network has been very clear about the format for this performance. For consistency and to ensure a perfect show, we'll be using pre-recorded tracks. You'll be lip-syncing." He watched Elvis closely. There wasn't anger or surprise, just a slight narrowing of those blue eyes, a subtle tightening around his lips. It was a look Art had seen before on seasoned performers. Resignation, Colonel Parker, on the other hand, nodded approvingly. "Good, good. We like control, no surprises. Elvis is a professional. He knows the drill. He'll hit every mark, every cue, just like the record. Perfect." Elvis just stood there silently absorbing the words. His gaze distant. Art felt a pang of something akin to pity. This was the king of rock and roll, arguably the most electrifying performer of his generation, being told to mime his own voice. It felt wrong, like putting a wild stallion in a tiny cage. Just then, a young woman hurried into the green room clutching a clipboard. She had bright, eager eyes and a mop of curly brown hair that seemed perpetually on the verge of escaping its clip. She was Lily, one of Art's most enthusiastic production assistants, and a self-proclaimed Elvis fanatic. "Mr. Miller, sorry to interrupt," Lily began. Then her eyes landed on Elvis, and she froze, her jaw dropped. "Slavis." "Oh my goodness," she whispered, her cheeks flushing. Elvis, noticing her, offered a small, kind smile. "Hello there," he said gently. Lily practically melted. "Mr. Presley, it's an honor. I'm Lily. I've been listening to your records since I was a kid. You're amazing." Her voice was filled with such genuine awe and adoration that it cut through the cynical atmosphere of the room. Art saw a different flicker in Elvis's eyes, this time a hint of genuine warmth, perhaps even a touch of vulnerability touched by Lily's unaffected admiration. It was a stark contrast to the hardened business discussion they'd just had. "Nice to meet you, Lily," Elvis said, his smile widening slightly. Colonel Parker cleared his throat. A subtle warning. Lily quickly snapped back to her professional demeanor, though her eyes still shone. I'll just be outside if you need anything, Mr. Miller," she stammered, backing out of the room. As she left, Art couldn't help but notice the faint air of disappointment that seemed to settle over Lily once the door closed. She hadn't said anything about the lip-syncing, but Art knew she wanted to hear him sing, and so did Art. But for now the rules were set. The king had arrived, but his voice was for the moment silent. The first few days of rehearsal were exactly as Art had feared. Elvis was a consummate professional. He arrived on time, hit every mark, moved with an almost eerie precision, his lips forming the words to his classic songs, perfectly in sync with the pre-recorded tracks. He swayed. He gestured. He even offered a few of his signature hit movements, all choreographed to perfection on the monitors. It looked flawless. The lighting cues were hitting their marks. The camera angles were sweeping just right, capturing his iconic profile. Any network executive watching would have been thrilled. It was a polished, high-definition ghost of a performance, but something was missing. The studio, usually filled with the crackle of energy during a rehearsal, felt strangely muted. The musicians, relegated to miming their own instruments, along with the playback, looked bored, their movements listless. The dancers went through their routines with mechanical efficiency. Art, watching from the control booth, felt it keenly. It was like watching a movie of a great concert instead of being at the concert itself. Elvis's eyes, though focused, seemed to lack the fire that Art remembered from his earlier performances. His smiles were polite, almost automatic. He was giving them exactly what they asked for, a technically perfect lip sync, but none of his soul. Lily, the young production assistant, often hovered near the stage, her clipboard forgotten in her hand, her gaze fixed on Elvis. Art would sometimes catch her expression, a mixture of awe for his presence, but also a quiet sadness. She watched him move. She saw the crowd pleasing gestures, but she also seemed to see the invisible chains that bound his true voice. One afternoon during a lunch break, the playback suddenly cut out. Elvis, who had been practicing a particularly energetic move, stopped mid-motion. The sudden silence was jarring. Without the music, the studio felt emptier than ever. Elvis stood there for a moment, then almost unconsciously he hummed a few bars of "Suspicious Minds." It wasn't loud, just a soft, clear baritone floating through the vast space. Then his eyes seemed to lose their distant quality. Closed them for a second, then opened them, a different spark in them. He moved to a mic stand that was set up for stage blocking, not actually plugged in, and just for a moment he gripped it, his fingers flexing. He looked like he wanted to sing, really sing to that empty room. The crew was scattered eating lunch, but a few looked up momentarily, caught by the unexpected sound of his real voice. Then the track suddenly kicked back, and a network technician having fixed the issue. Elvis's expression snapped back to its practiced neutrality, and he resumed his lip-syncing. The moment of raw spontaneity gone, Art saw it. He saw the flicker of life, the hint of the fire that was still there, just waiting to be unleashed. He saw the way Lily, who had been standing nearby, had caught her breath, her eyes wide with recognition. Later that day, Art found himself staring at the old photo of young Elvis on his wall. He remembered the feeling of electricity that performance had generated, the sense that anything could happen. Now everything was planned, controlled, safe, and sterile. Network executives had been coming and going, all of them praising the smoothness and professionalism of the rehearsals. "This is exactly what we need." Art. Roger had beamed. No surprises. Just pure, unadulterated Elvis. Exactly as the public remembers him. But Art didn't want the public to just remember him. He wanted them to feel him. He wanted them to feel the shivers down their spine, the way his voice could stir something deep inside you. He knew, with a certainty that chilled him, that this lip-sync performance, however technically perfect, wouldn't do that. It would be a polite success, a momentary bump in the ratings, but it wouldn't be magic. And Art Miller had always been in the business of magic. He knew he was trapped. He had made a deal with the devil. And now he was watching the king of rock and roll, a man who once blew the roof off stadiums with his sheer vocal power reduced to a pantomime, the weight of it pressed down on him, a heavy, quiet despair. He wondered if Elvis felt it too, this quiet erosion of his spirit. Day by day, during these silent rehearsals, the studio felt like a pressure cooker. With less than a week until the show's live broadcast, the tension was palpable. Network executives, like predatory birds, flocked to the set, their faces beaming with self-congratulation. "Art, this is magnificent," chirped one, a woman in a power suit with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. "He's so disciplined, so perfect. This is going to be the biggest thing on television this year." Their praise, meant to reassure, only fueled Art's unease. Disciplined and perfect were the wrong words for Elvis Presley. They sounded more like descriptions of a machine than a man. He heard the whispers among the crew too. "He looks tired. He's lost his edge. Just doing it for the money, you know." Each whisper was a small stab to Art's heart because he knew the truth. The man wasn't tired. He was stifled. He hadn't lost his edge. It was simply sheathed, held captive by the very people who were supposed to be aiding his talent. Art found himself spending more and more time pacing in his control booth, staring at the monitors, a growing sense of frustration bubbling within him. He remembered why he'd gotten into this business. For the goosebumps, for the electric jolt of a live performance that could never be la pocket. He yearned for the unexpected, the raw energy that transcended the screen and grabbed the audience by the throat. This show, however, felt manufactured, a gilded cage designed to contain the very wildness that made Elvis a legend. One evening, after a particularly sterile rehearsal, Art was sitting alone in the darkened studio, sketching out camera angles for the final broadcast. He heard a soft shuffling behind him and turned to see Lily. Her usual boundless energy deflated. Her shoulders slumped. "Still here, Lily?" Art asked, trying for a light tone. She nodded, walking over to stand beside him, gazing out at the empty stage where Elvis had just been miming his heart out. I can't shake it, Mr. Miller," she began, her voice quiet. "He's amazing, of course. His moves, his smile, everything. But it's not him." "Not really," Art grunted the sound of agreement. "What do you mean, Lily?" he prodded, curious to hear her perspective. She turned to him, her eyes earnest. "They want his voice, Liv, shaking the walls. They want the raw power, the sweat, the mistakes even, because that's what makes it real. That's what makes it Elvis." Her words resonated deep within Art. She had articulated exactly what he had been feeling, what he had been struggling with. Lily, with her pure, unadulterated fan's heart, saw the truth that the network executives with their spreadsheets and ratings projections could not. "You're right," Lily, Art said, rubbing a hand over his tired face. "You're absolutely right." A few minutes later, Art noticed Elvis himself. King had lingered after everyone else had left, standing alone on the vast stage, bathed in the cool light of a single work lamp. He wasn't practicing his moves. He was simply standing there, looking out at the rows of empty seats, his posture strangely hunched, his shoulders seeming to carry the weight of the world. He wasn't looking at the cameras or the lights. He was looking at the silent, vacant space where an audience should be, where their cheers and screams should echo. A faraway, almost mournful look was etched on his face. He seemed to be longing for something that wasn't there, something that couldn't be faked. Art watched him, a realization dawning. Elvis wasn't just a performer. He was a creature of the stage, an artist who fed off the energy of a live audience, who needed to give his whole self to his music. And they were starving him, feeding him empty calories of pre-recorded tracks. That image, Elvis alone on stage, yearning for something real, burned itself into Art's mind. He knew he couldn't stand by and let this happen. He had to do something, anything, to bring the real Elvis back. Not just for the ratings, but for the sake of art, for the sake of the fans, and perhaps for the sake of the king himself. The pressure was on, and Art knew he was about to make a very difficult, very risky choice. The next morning, Art arrived on set with a newfound determination. He felt the spark ignite within him, a flicker of the old rebel director he used to be. He knew he was risking his job, his reputation. Everything but Lily's words and the image of Elvis standing alone on that stage haunted him. He couldn't let the king be silenced like this. He found Elvis in his dressing room. Looking through some fan mail, he seemed calmer, less guarded than usual. Art took a deep breath. "Mr. Presley," Art began, his voice low. "Can I speak with you for a moment? Just us." Elvis looked up, his blue eyes meeting Art's. He nodded, gesturing to a chair. "Sure, Art. What's on your mind?" "Mr. Presley, I'm going to be frank. These rehearsals, they're technically perfect. You're hitting every mark, every cue, but it's not you." Elvis's gaze remained steady, but Art saw a flicker of something, a hint of understanding, perhaps even a shared frustration. "It's what they want, Art," Elvis said quietly. "Colonel Parker, the network. They want it safe. Control it. Do you want it, Mr. Presley?" Art pressed gently. "Is this what you want to do, to stand there and mind your own voice?" Elvis shifted in his seat, a sigh escaping him. He looked away towards a framed photo of his daughter, Lisa Marie, the machine art. He said, his voice almost a whisper, "It's a big machine. Sometimes you feel like you're just a cog in it. You go where it tells you, you do what it says." Paused, then looked back at Art, a flash of the old fire in his eyes. "But it's not the same. It's not alive." Art felt a surge of hope. "Exactly. It's not alive. And that's why I'm here. I can't stand by and watch this. I know what you can do, Mr. Presley. I've seen you, I've heard you. And so have millions of others." He leaned in, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "Look, the network wants perfect. Colonel Parker wants control. I get it. But what if we could give them perfect and real? What if we could find a way for you to sing?" Elvis raised an eyebrow, a hint of curiosity in his expression. "How?" "The contract's ironclad. Lip sync only." "I'm not asking you to break the contract. Not yet," Art clarified. "No cameras, no executives. Just to get the levels right, to feel the music. What do you say?" Art held his breath. This was a direct violation of the spirit, if not the letter, of the network's demands. If Colonel Parker found out, Art would be out of a job before he could blink. But he had to try. Elvis looked at him for a long moment, those blue eyes searching Art's face, weighing the risk, the audacity of the proposal. Then a slow smile spread across his face, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "A sound check, you say?" he murmured, the corners of his lips twitching upward. "Just for the feel of it." "Exactly," Art confirmed, a triumphant grin beginning to form on his own face. "No pressure, no audience, just you and the music." Elvis chuckled. A rich, warm sound that filled the room. "You're a wild one, Art Miller," he said, shaking his head. "All right, tell the boys tonight. I think I'd like that very much. It's been a long time since I just sang, just for the feel of it." Art felt a surge of exhilaration. The king had agreed. It was a tiny crack in the dam, but it was a start. He stood up, feeling a lightness he hadn't experienced in weeks. "Consider it done, Mr. Presley. I'll make the arrangements." As Art left the dressing room, he ran into Lily in the hallway. "Lily," he said, unable to hide his excitement. "Gather the band. Tell them we're doing an unscheduled, very private, very important sound check tonight. Live mics. Full band. Tell them to bring their A game." Lily's eyes widened, a slow smile spreading across her face, as she seemed to put the pieces together. "Live mics," she whispered, her voice filled with disbelief and pure joy. "Oh, Mr. Miller, you didn't." Art winked. "Just for the feel of it, Lily, just for the feel of it." That night, the soundstage was eerily quiet, save for the hushed anticipation of a handful of people. Art had carefully arranged it. Only the core band members, the guitarist Scotty Moore, the bassist Bill Black, though not the original, a talented replacement, the drummer DJ Fontana, a couple of trusted sound engineers, and Lily were present. Colonel Parker had long since left for the night, oblivious to the small rebellion brewing on his client's set. The stage lights were dimmed, casting long shadows. The atmosphere was different from a regular rehearsal, electric, almost sacred. The band members, usually stoic, fidgeted with their instruments, their eyes alight with a barely contained excitement. They knew what this meant. They knew what they were about to hear. Elvis walked onto the stage, dressed casually in jeans and a simple shirt. He looked different, too. The weariness seemed to have lifted slightly, replaced by a nervous energy, a deep breath taken before a plunge. He walked to the center mic stand, a real live microphone waiting for him, picked it up, testing its weight, his fingers closing around it almost reverently. He looked at Art, who was in the control booth, giving him a quiet thumbs up. He looked at the band, who nodded back, ready. He looked at Lily standing by the stage door, her hands clasped, her eyes wide with unadulterated hope. For a moment he closed his eyes, head bowed. The studio was utterly silent. Then he raised the microphone, took a deep, shuddering breath, and the first note emerged. It wasn't a powerful, booming opening. It was soft, almost tentative. The opening lines of Heartbreak Hotel, sung a cappella. But even in its quietness, the voice was unmistakable. It was rich, resonant, filled with a raw emotion that had been painfully absent from the lip-sync rehearsals. It was pure, unadulterated Elvis. Then the band subtly joined in their instruments, weaving around his voice. Scotty's guitar, a low, bluesy moan, DJ's drums, a steady, hypnotic beat, Bill's bass, a deep, comforting hum. It was a symphony of sound building, growing, filling every corner of the vast studio. Elvis's eyes opened. They were no longer weary or distant. They blazed with an intensity that Art had only seen in old film footage. He moved, not with practiced choreography, but with an instinctive rhythm that was entirely his own. His hips swayed, his legs bent, his hands clutched the microphone as if it were a lifeline. He wasn't performing for anyone. He was performing because he had to. Because the music was flowing through him, and he had to let it out. The sound swelled. The raw power of his voice seemed to grow with each lyric, each note. It wasn't just sound. It was a physical force. Art felt it in his bones, rattling the very foundations of the control booth. He watched, mesmerized, as the king of rock and roll unleashed a torrent of emotion. A lifetime of heartbreak and joy, rebellion and triumph, all pouring out through his golden throat. Lily, standing by the stage, had tears streaming down her face, unashamed. She wasn't just hearing the voice. She was feeling the legend, alive and breathing before her. The band members who had played these songs countless times were transformed. Their faces were alight, their movements infused with a passion that had been missing for weeks. They were playing with Elvis, truly playing, and it was glorious. The song built to a crescendo. Elvis's voice soaring powerful, then fading into a final, lingering note. When the last echo died, the silence that followed was not empty, but filled with the reverberations of what had just happened. Art slowly took off his headphones, his hands trembling slightly. He looked at the sound engineers, their faces awestruck, their mouths slightly agape. He looked at Lily, who was still wiping tears from her eyes, a radiant smile on her face. This was it. This was the real Elvis. This was the magic. And Art knew with a certainty that was both terrifying and exhilarating that this could not, would not, be hidden. This voice, this power deserved to be heard by the world, live and unchained. The roof, it felt like, had just been gently lifted, giving a glimpse of the sky. Now, Art had to figure out how to blow it off completely. The next morning, Art felt a buzz of nervous energy that was almost addictive. He had heard the king really sing, and the experience had filled him with a reckless courage. There was no going back now. He had to fight for it. His first target was the network executives. He called an emergency meeting, pulling Roger Sterling and 2 other high-ranking officials away from their usual morning rituals of stock reports and power breakfast. They met in the sterile, windowless conference room, the air thick with unspoken impatience. "Gentleman MS Albright," Art began, standing at the head of the polished table. "I have a proposal regarding the Elvis Presley performance." Roger Sterling frowned. "What is there to propose, Art?" "It's all set. He's lip-syncing. It's going to be a home run." "Going to be a home run that misses the park entirely," Art countered, his voice gaining strength. "What we have right now is technically perfect. Yes, but it's dead. It's a hollow shell. Last night I had a private sound check with Mr. Presley. He sang live. A collective gasp went around the table. MS Albright's eyes narrowed. "You did what, Art? Are you insane? You know the contract, you know our policy." "I know the policy," Art said, holding their gaze. "And I also know what makes great television. What I heard last night was not just great, it was phenomenal. It was the real Elvis, unchained. What if he cracks a note? What if the sound isn't perfect? What if he improvises something we don't want? We lose control." "You lose some control?" "Yes," Art conceded. "But you gain authenticity. You gain magic. People don't want to fund a push." Lily, my PA, a huge Elvis fan. She nearly cried. Just then the conference room door swung open, and Colonel Tom Parker walked in, uninvited as always. He had clearly been informed, probably by one of Roger's spies. His face was a thundercloud, a half-smoked cigar clenched between his teeth. "What is this nonsense, Miller?" the colonel growled, his voice booming. "Breaking contracts, risking my client's reputation. We had a deal. No live singing. It's too unpredictable, too risky for the brand. Colonel, with all due respect, your client is being stifled." Art shot back, emboldened. "He's a live performer. That's where his genius lies. This lip-syncing is diminishing him, not protecting him. Imagine the headlines. Elvis Return slammed his fist on the table. I imagine headlines like Elvis flubs, note, embarrassing performance, or unprofessional display." He pointed a stubby finger at Art. He looked directly at the colonel, then back at Roger. "Then fire me," he said, his voice ringing with conviction. "Go ahead, I'll take the fall. But I'm telling you, this is the right call. You brought Elvis here for a ratings miracle. I'm telling you how to get it, and I'm willing to bet my career on it." A stunned silence filled the room. No one expected Art to put his job on the line. He knew he was being reckless, but he also knew, deep down, that he was right. This wasn't just about a TV show anymore. It was about an artist, a legend, and the very soul of live performance. The ball was now in their court. They could play it safe and watch their show wither, or they could take a chance, trust in the magic, and truly blow the roof off. The silence in the conference room stretched on thick and heavy. Roger Sterling looked from Art's determined face to Colonel Parker's seething one, then back to his fellow executives whose faces were a mixture of fear and reluctant intrigue. Art had thrown down the gauntlet, and now they had to pick it up finally. MS Albright cleared her throat. "Art, you're talking about a significant deviation from the agreed-upon plan. It's unprecedented for a star of Mr. Presley's magnitude to switch to live per contractual obligations for control." "Precisely why it would be such a sensation," Art countered, seizing the opening. "The public craves authenticity. They're tired of packaged perfection. This isn't just about a performance. It's about a moment, a statement that the king is back, live and unstoppable. Colonel Parker scoffed. And what if he chokes? What if he falls? What if the sound system fails? Who takes the blame for that, Miller? You. You'll be picking up trash on the side of the road. Then I'll pick up trash, Art said, unwavering. But I have faith in Mr. Presley, and I have faith in my crew. We can do this. We can make it technically perfect and raw. We just need the chance. Roger, ever the businessman, saw the potential, the ratings. All right, he said slowly. Let's be realistic. We can't do the entire show live, the contract, the logistics. It's too much, but what if we compromise, arting at Colonel Parker? Just one, a single designated song in the broadcast. It will be performed live. The rest remains lip sync, as agreed. If that one song is anything less than phenomenal, if there's any technical glitch, any misstep, any flubbed note, as you put it, Colonel E. Roger turned to Art. Then Elvis is pulled immediately in Mr. Miller, permanently, and we'll send out a press release that makes it clear why it was a staggering gamble. All or nothing on one song. Art felt a cold dread followed by a rush of adrenaline. This was it, the high stakes he had envisioned, but tenfold. Colonel Parker stroked his chin, his eyes shrewd. The risk was there, but so was the potential for a massive publicity boost if it worked. He considered the alternative. Elvis, perhaps resentful, doing a lifeless lip sync, potentially burning out his audience. This offer, while risky, was a chance to reignite the flame. And if it is phenomenal, he asked, his voice low. Roger swallowed. If it's phenomenal, then we'll consider future live performances, and Mr. Miller gets to keep his job with a substantial bonus for the ratings spike. Colonel Parker looked at Art, a glint in his eye that might have been respect, or perhaps just a challenge. All right, Miller, he said finally. You got your bet. You put your career on the line. Let's see if the king still has it in him. Art nodded, a tight smile on his face. He does, Colonel. You'll see. The news spread through the studio like wildfire. One song, Live, the crew buzzed with a mixture of excitement and terror. The sound engineers, who had been grumbling about the lip sync, were suddenly invigorated, meticulously checking every cable, every microphone. The lighting crew experimented with new effects. To match the raw energy they now hoped to capture, Art went straight to Elvis's dressing room. He laid out the terms of the deal. Elvis listened, his expression. They're terrified of the risk, but I told them you're worth it, and I meant it. Elvis looked at him, and Art saw profound gratitude in his eyes. Thank you, Art, he said, his voice soft but firm, for believing, for fighting for me, for the music. He stood up, a new energy radiating from him. All right, which song? Art smiled. That's up to you, Mr. Presley. Pick the one that means the most. Pick the one that will blow the roof off. A wide, genuine smile broke across Elvis's face. The smile of a man who had been given back his voice. I know just the one, Art, he said, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. Oh, I know just the one. The atmosphere on set shifted dramatically. The dull mechanical hum of lip-sync rehearsals was replaced by a vibrant, nervous energy, excitement mixed with fear. Everyone knew the stakes were incredibly high. But for the first time in weeks, there was a palpable sense of purpose, a shared mission, to make that one live song the most unforgettable moment in television history. Show night arrived, crackling with an almost unbearable tension. Backstage. The air was thick with hairspray, nerves, and the quiet hum of equipment. Art paced in the control booth, his stomach doing somersaults. He watched the monitors, a dozen screens showing different angles of the audience filing in, the stage crew making final adjustments, and Elvis, calm and composed in his dressing room, getting ready. The first half of the show was exactly as planned. Elvis appeared resplendent in a dazzling white jumpsuit, his hair perfectly coiffed. He moved through his pre-recorded hits with the practiced ease of a seasoned showman. The lip sync was flawless, technically brilliant. The audience applauded politely. Enjoying them, the studio felt contained, polite. It was good, but it wasn't great. It was a performance, not an event. Art watched his heart pounding in his chest. He knew what was coming. A short commercial break. The stage crew scrambled quickly, adjusting microphones, checking connections. The band members, previously miming, now gripped their instruments with real purpose, their eyes fixed on Elvis. Back in the control booth, Roger Sterling and the other executives watched, their faces pale with anxiety. Colonel Parker stood nearby, his arms crossed, a grim expression on his face. This was their gamble, their high-stakes bet. The lights dimmed. The announcer's voice boomed over the loudspeakers. And now, ladies and gentlemen, a very special performance from the king himself, Mr. Elvis Presley. The audience roared, a wave of anticipation sweeping through the studio. Elvis walked to the center of the stage, bathed in a single spotlight. He looked out at the sea of faces, a knowing glint in his eye. This wasn't just a performance. It was a reunion. He took a deep breath, clutching the live microphone. Art watched him, holding his own breath. Elvis nodded to the band. A silent signal. And then the first notes of American Trio filled the air. It started with the somber, powerful strains of Dixie, Elvis's voice clear and resonant, almost a challenge. The audience listened, captivated. Then pally, it transitioned into All My Trials, and Elvis's voice swelled a deep, soulful plea. It was raw, heartfelt, every nuance of his vocal power pouring out. The audience shifted. Confusion turned to awe. There was no pre-recorded polish here, just the pure, unvarnished power of his voice. People started to stir, leaning forward in their seats. And then came the crescendo, the battle hymn of the Republic. Elvis leaned into the microphone, his voice soaring. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He wasn't just singing. He was pouring his entire being into every note. Sweat beaded on his forehead, his face alight with passion. He gestured, not with practiced choreography, but with the expansive movements of a man utterly consumed by the music. The band was on fire, their instruments ringing, each note perfectly supporting his powerful vocals. The sound filled the studio, not just reaching the back row, but seeming to vibrate through the very walls. The audience was no longer just listening, they were feeling. Goosebumps rose on arms. Tears welled in eyes, jaws dropped. Glory, glory, hallelujah, his truth is marching on. Elvis belted out, his voice reaching an almost impossibly high, soaring note that hung in the air, defiant and glorious. And then it happened. The sound system pushed to its absolute limits, vibrated, hummed, and then a distinct sharp crack echoed through the studio. It wasn't the roof literally blowing off, but it felt like it. The sheer, overwhelming force of Elvis's voice, combined with the booming brass and thundering drums, created an energy so potent it seemed to physically shake the very foundations of the set. The audience screamed, not in fear, but in ecstatic release. They were on their feet, cheering, roaring, a cacophony of adoration that drowned out everything else. People were clapping, stomping, some even crying. Elvis stood there, bathed in the blinding lights, his chest heaving, his face alight with pure, unadulterated joy. He had done it. He had blown the roof off. In the control booth, Art watched, a triumphant grin splitting his face. Roger Sterling and MS Albright were staring at the monitors, their mouths agape, their previous anxiety replaced by sheer, unadulterated shock and awe. Colonel Parker, usually so stoic, had even allowed a small, almost imperceptible smirk to touch his lips. He might hate the lack of control, but he couldn't deny the magic. This was no mere performance. This was an event. This was the king truly alive, truly singing. And the world was listening. The final note of American Turion resonated through the studio, followed by a deafening roar. The audience was a wave of pure emotion, screaming, cheering, stamping their feet in a thunderous standing ovation. They wouldn't stop. They didn't want the moment to end. Elvis stood on stage, beaming. Gone was the weariness, the distant gaze. His eyes sparkled. His smile was genuine, broad, and full of an infectious joy. He was soaked in sweat, his jumpsuit clinging to him, but he looked more alive, more vibrant than he had in years. He bowed, genuinely touched by the overwhelming response, and then blew kisses to the crowd, basking in the pure, unadulterated love that flowed back to him. In the control booth, Art let out a long, shaky breath. He felt a wave of profound relief and triumph wash over him. He had risked everything, and it had paid off beyond his wildest dreams. He looked at Roger Sterling, who was still staring at the monitors, a dazed, delighted expression on his face. "Art," Roger stammered, finally turning to him, his voice thick with awe. "Art, that was incredible. My God, the phones are probably already melting down." Ms. Albright, who had been stiff and formal for weeks, actually had tears in her eyes. "He's magnificent," she whispered. "Simply magnificent." Colonel Parker, ever the pragmatist, cleared his throat. He still had that small, almost smirk on his face. "Well, Miller," he said grudgingly, "you got your miracle. I suppose we'll have to consider those future live performances after all." His eyes held a flicker of something new, a grudging respect perhaps for Art's daring. Art just grinned, too exhilarated to be smug. He looked down at the stage where Elvis was finally being escorted off, still waving to the adoring crowd. King had rediscovered his throne, not through careful choreography and pre-recorded tracks, but through the raw, unbridled power of his own voice. Later, Art found Elvis in his dressing room, surrounded by his now elated entourage. The room was buzzing with excited chatter. Elvis saw Art and instantly dismissed everyone else wanting a private moment. "Art," Elvis said, his voice still a little hoarse from the effort, but brimming with satisfaction. He extended his hand, and Art grasped it. This time, the handshake was even warmer, a silent acknowledgement of their shared victory. "Thank you. Truly. I didn't realize how much I needed that to just sing, to feel it again." "It was an honor, Mr. Presley," Art said, his voice thick with emotion. "You reminded us all what true artistry is." Elvis chuckled. "A genuine hearty sound. And you reminded me, I thought the part of me was well put away for good. The machine, you know." He clapped Art on the shoulder. "You're a good man, R. Miller. A crazy one, but a good one." Just then, Lily appeared at the door, her face glowing. "Mr. Presley, that was the most amazing thing I've ever seen. The phones are ringing off the hook. Everyone's talking about it. The ratings are going to be through the roof." Elvis smiled warmly at her. "Thank you, Lily. It means a lot to hear that." Lily turned to Art, her eyes shining. Art looked from Lily's enthusiastic face to Elvis's contented one. This was why he did it. Not for the ratings, though those would be astronomical, but for the moments like this. The moment when an artist rediscovered his voice, when an audience was genuinely moved, when the impossible felt exhilaratingly possible. The aftermath was exactly as Art had predicted. The network was scrambling to capitalize on the Elvis phenomenon. Plans for more live segments, more spontaneous performances were already being drafted. Colonel Parker, ever the shrewd businessman, was now pushing for higher fees for the next appearance, but the bitterness was gone. Replaced by a calculating, King's brand had been reignited, not through cautious control, but through the wild, unpredictable fire of his own talent. As for Art Miller, the spotlight hour was saved. But more than that, he had saved something else too. His integrity, his belief in the raw power of live performance. He had taken a gamble, put his career on the line, and in doing so, he had helped the king remember that he was not just a symbol, not just a product, but a force of nature. Elvis Presley had come to lip sync, but he had sung live and truly blown the roof off, reminding everyone, including himself, that the king of rock and roll still reigned, and his voice was still pure magic. The legend was not just preserved. It was vibrantly, magnificently, eternally reigning.